Hi, and welcome to this next recent reads. I figured I should go ahead and get it started off on a Monday, even though I don't have any books to report, because I don't know when I will finish a book. My hope is to finish this book before the end of tomorrow, which would be January, so that I can count this one in my January reads. This is Stellar Lune by Shanna Messenger, the latest, I think the penultimate book in the Keeper of the Lost Cities series. This book and my audiobook, Return of the King, are the only books that I know for sure that I'm going to read this week, because Wednesday marks the first day of a new month, and I have a brand new TBR that just went up today, and I have got so many reads on there that I am so excited to read. I have no idea how I'm going to decide once Wednesday comes around. So I have nothing more really to talk about in this little bit of an update, except to say what I'm currently reading and that I'm super excited about all the reads that I get to choose from starting on Wednesday. And here we go with another week of recent reads. Okay, so coming at you with another update. It is Wednesday evening. I finished another book. I actually finished it last night, but that book is Keeper of the Lost Cities, Stellar Lune. So I am finally caught up, and now I have read every book that was on the list, with the exception of those that I chose not to read. So have I read every book? Who cares? This also means that I'm caught up with yet another series, so that's good. Which brings my total for January to 4 series finished, DNF'd, or caught up with. Now, Stellar Lune, one of the things I discovered when I started reading was what makes it a Barnes & Noble special edition, because I did get it at that hardback sale, and that is, I think, this Under the Dust Jacket art, which is gorgeous. I loved it. I wish that I loved this book as much as the verse cover art. This is not a bad book. One of my favorite moments overall in the series happens in this book, you know, towards this end of it. See, I loved the novella in Unlocked. And I think what made that so high, like I rated Unlocked 5 stars because of that novella. And the reason is because it alternated between Sophie and Keith's perspectives. And you don't have that, because that's why she said she put that in there, because these books are primarily from Sophie's perspective, you know, third person, but Sophie's point of view. And I missed having that side of it. And also the plot pretty much goes nowhere. Pretty much goes nowhere. And they go back to school, which obviously Sophie's not all that happy about. She's like, there's all this stuff going on and you want me to go back to school? Okay. So I'm torn, because there were some really good parts. There were some great character moments that I really loved and appreciated and needed to be there, but there was stuff that was missing for me. Like, I didn't understand how or why everyone was treating her the way that she did when she's stepping up to become a leader, which was what they've wanted of her. It's like, aren't you coming down a little harsh? So that part didn't make sense. I mean, coming from Stina, it made sense, but everybody else, I'm like, really? And I know it's awkward because of what has happened over the course of the relationship journey of Fitz and Sophie, but Fitz as a character just does not feel like the same person as in earlier books before Sophie really starts trying to decide, you know, who she wants to be with. He just doesn't seem like the same person. And even the times when he says he's going to be supportive for whatever reason, when they go through the Cognate Inquisition or whatever, it rings false to me. And I don't know if Messenger is trying to do that or not, but I don't know what to do with Fitz's character. So all of that together, I don't know. This one might be as low as a 3.5 star. I'm not sure. If it went down to 3.5 star, it would be a very high one, so close to a 4 star. But ultimately, I think originally she said it was going to be 9 books, and then she said, oh, I have more that I want to tell, so I'm going to make it 10. I think it should have been 9, because there's a lot in here that could have been condensed. There's a lot in here that I think didn't really serve to forward the plot, the overall plot of the series. So unfortunately, it was a little bit disappointing, but I still love the world. Okay, I just unboxed my Fairy Loot, which is the last of my January unboxings. I almost said February because it is February, but Fairy Loot always arrives at the end of the month, and I cannot stop staring at how amazing that book is. You'll see that in the upcoming video. But I do have an update. I decided that, so I was torn between whether I was going to start with the Graceling Realm, because I have 5 of those books to read, or whether I was going to start with one of my African American books, because it is Black History Month, and I decided to pick up Run. Now, is this the one with the dust jacket? No, I just love this cover so much. It's one of his quotes, and it ends with, and get in good trouble, necessary trouble. One of the things he's infamous for saying. I really enjoyed this read, the experience of this read, because so many people, when they study the civil rights era, they will say focus on Martin Luther King, or they will focus on these key marquee events like the march on, not the March on Washington, but the March from Selma, where John Lewis was involved. And they'll stop at the passage of the Civil Rights Bill, or they'll skim over the period in between the signing of the Civil Rights Bill and the assassination of MLK. Or if they do talk about that era, they don't talk about the other things going on and the differences. And this picks up, I thought it was going to talk about when he was in Congress, but it actually picks up directly after March, the March trilogy does. And it's talking about the things that were happening after the bill was signed, and the fact that signing this bill does not make everything better. And it's an aspect of civil rights history that I honestly don't know as much about the details as I do from March. And I really appreciated the perspective and how he was torn between sticking with nonviolence. Well, he wasn't torn with it, but what it did to his organization, because there were the rise of the Black Power and movement and the Black Panther movement and all those different things. And I did look it up to see, and there was an article where the illustrators and the authors were asked if there were going to be these sequels, because they were doing it in conjunction with John Lewis, and this was posthumously. This was published posthumously, and they said they don't really know if there's going to be, because it was such a collaboration between them, the back and forth between them creating the panels and getting his feedback and hearing his enthusiasm for things, and obviously they can't get that anymore. And I completely understand, but it's just so sad, because the way this ends, it's not wrapped up. It's not a conclusion to anything, and it ends kind of sad, because he's at a point at the end of this book where things seem hopeless. I'm just getting through some of the notes. Things seem kind of hopeless, and he's not really sure what's going on. He's moving on to the next chapter. He's just unsure of a lot of things that are going on in between. And obviously, because it picks up right after the Civil Rights Bill was signed, the Voting Rights Act was signed, there's still some time to go before he processes the death of MLK and his work with Robert Kennedy and his presidential campaign and subsequent assassination. So I think this was a really good way to start out the month, and this is a really solid graphic novel, and I'm really glad that now I own the March trilogy and this one, and hopefully in the future maybe these authors will come back and finish up this series. Okay, so I'm here to wrap up this week's recent reads. I have 2 more books to talk about that I have finished. I'm working on that Morgenthau book that's going to take me forever. I've started that already. I'm enjoying it, but it's definitely the right decision to take it a little bit at a time. I'll probably be including that one in the recent reads towards the end of the month, because that's when I figured that I'm going to finish it. I've also started Strike the Zither, but I don't think that I will finish it in time to get the video up and edit it and etc. So that will probably be in next week's recent reads. The next book that I need to talk about is the Graceling graphic novel. I finished this on Thursday, and I am so glad that not only did I purchase the graphic novel adaptation, but that I chose to read it before diving back into the series. Even though I've heard that they're not as connected as others, that they're more companion novels, but that they build on each other, I'm glad that I read it as a graphic novel version. I was a little bit wary after my experience with the Legend adaptation, Legend by Marie Lu, and how that just turned out to be a really terrible adaptation. This one, however, I knew it had a chance to be better because it's longer, because, I mean, Graceling is a longer book than Legend, but proportionally, I think it's longer, so it could include more from the original story. And the way that it was adapted from the original story and combined with the artwork fills in the gaps of those missing words that you have in an adaptation, bringing it down page-wise. It wasn't necessarily my favorite style, like for facial features. However, the artist did a really good job in filling in those gaps, and it told the story really well. Now, I'm not going to rate it because this is an adaptation of a book that I've already read before. I have already a review for the original book, but I'm glad that I read it before going into the rest of the series. The last book that I'm going to talk about in this week's recent reads is Far Sector by N.K. Jemisin. So this is a bind up of 12 different individual comics. Going into this, I knew that there would be a little bit of a learning curve because I've never been a comics reader. It's just never been something that I've done. And my familiarity with superheroes comes from the movies. And of those movies, primarily Marvel movies. And Green Lantern is DC. So there was a little bit of a hurdle to get over with the way of storytelling, the style of storytelling, and also the fact that I really don't know anything about Green Lantern, a Green Lantern's background, how it became like multiple Green Lanterns, and etc. She's not the original. And additionally, I've realized, because I heard somebody else say this, N.K. Jemisin, when she writes, she just dumps you into the story and then you figure things out. That's exactly what happened here. So with all of that, it took a little while for me to get into it, and it's definitely outside of my comfort zone. But N.K. Jemisin is such a brilliant storyteller that even with these things that aren't necessarily my style of storytelling, I ended up absolutely loving this book. And I started it Friday evening, didn't read all that much before I went and was cross-stitching and listening to Return of the King, which I also finished. I'm not going to talk about that separately because, you know, it's Return of the King and I love it and it's like my billionth reread. But back to Far Sector. This is just a really compelling and interesting story. And at one point there is, and I'm not going to show like the actual panel because, you know, copyright issues or whatever, but at one point there's a protest against what the government of this city is doing. And someone says something about we have to have law and order. And there's another panel right there that incorporates so many different examples from American history, because that's where Jo, the Green Lantern in this story, is from. She was like a kid during 9/11, so about my age. It pulls in Manzanar. Manzanar is the one that I remember, but a few other things. And just to have this alien world and them demanding law and order and suppression of these protests, and then seeing that contrast. Spectacular. I really need to read more of N.K. Jemisin's work. So there you have it. Those are the books that I read this week. I did read 3 graphic works because I'm trying to, you know, get through my February TBR and also, you know, read things that I want to read. So these are my February reads thus far. And to finish out January, which was the first 2 days of this week, I read Return of the King. I actually just finished this last night because there were several days where I just read and I didn't listen to an audiobook, because I listened to this as audiobook. Andy Serkis' narration is fantastic. I just love this story. And then I also read Stellar Loon, which my January wrap-up is going up before this, so you'll hear more thoughts about that, even more than what I put in this video, in that video. So there you have it. Pretty successful week. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one.